Hello, r/teenagers, and welcome back to another Teencast episode, the show that delves deep into the professions and personalities all around the world. I'm Josh, and today I'm joined by Eric, one of the r/teenagers mods. Unfortunately, our other usual host, Dinesh, can't join us today due to Wi-Fi issues. However, we can welcome the esteemed Ned Batchelder, who's known for his work in the Python community, and we can't wait to thank him enough for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Everyone, if you want to just kick back, grab a snack, and listen in on the conversation.
I got a question for you. So, just for everyone at home who's interested, what's it like working in the programming industry, particularly with Python as your language?
Yeah, so I've been in the Python industry, in the software industry for a long time. I'm much older than a teenager. Um, I like to say that I am crazy old, uh, so that I can deflect people's concerns about my age. Uh, but I love being a programmer. It's really suits my mental style. I love building things, and building software lets you build amazing things. You can get to almost unlimited complexity, which can also be a downside. Um, but it's great being able to go to work in the morning and have coding as part of my job. So I've really liked it. And Python has been a home for me for 20 years or something. I've been deeply embedded in the Python world for a very long time, and it only seems to be growing in popularity. So it seems like I can stay here for a while.
It's great to hear. I mean, how much has it changed since you
Uh,
were younger? Like
yeah,
when you
so,
when you
well,
first
the
started.
thing about Python as a technology is that about every 5 years or so, it finds some new domain to be dominant in. When I first started using Python, it was mostly thought of as system administration. You'd write some scripts to manage your server or something like that. Um, then it became web applications. Django showed up, and people were doing a lot of web applications with Python. And when that first happened, I remember people were saying things like, well, you don't use Python for web applications. Well, and now, of course, you use Python for web applications. 5 or 10 years ago, it was data science that suddenly Python was big in data science. And these days, it's big in AI. And I don't know what the next thing's going to be, um, but it just keeps growing. Um, so that's been a big change, right? When I started in Python, I kind of understood the domain, and then I did web applications, and I understood that domain. I don't know anything about data science. I don't know anything about how AI works. I see ChatGPT; it's amazing. There's some Python back there somewhere. I don't know how it works. And people have questions about data science. I don't know how to answer those questions. So the irony is that as I've stayed with Python and learned more and more about Python, Python has also kind of been skittering away from me, and I know less and less about some of the things that people want to know about Python, which is a challenge. I can try to learn those things, or I can accept that I don't know everything and still hang out in the Python world.
Well, that leads me on to the next point, really. Obviously, coding is and has been a massive part of your life for well forever. But what are like some of the main problems that you faced during coding, and like how have you overcome them? Like, has there ever been a time where you literally have just been close to giving up, or have just given up because it's just been too
Has
difficult
there
to
ever been a
overcome?
time? There have been times today where I felt like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to solve this problem. That happens to me all the time. Um, so let's see how to begin with this. So the big thing that I do that most people know me for in the Python world is that I maintain a pretty complex package called coverage.py, which is a tool for code coverage measurement, which means you write a bunch of tests, and then this tool can tell you how much of your code your tests are actually running, which is a very crude measure of the quality of your tests. If there's code that your tests aren't running, then that code definitely isn't tested. And I've been maintaining coverage.py for 19 years now. And there are constantly things that are happening in that code that I feel when I first see them, I think, I, I don't know why that is. And I don't even know how to start figuring out why that is. That's a very common feeling in maintaining a package like that. Um, and what happens is that I slowly whittle away at it. I put that problem aside. and then I come back to it, and or I'll have an idea. Oh, maybe I could get a little bit of information if I like put print statements in there, or maybe I could try this different environment and see if that makes a change, and that'll get me one step closer, and then eventually I'll get to the bottom of it with persistence. I have to persevere, and I'll get there. And that's a big difference between being a beginner and being an expert. Let's call me an expert. I've at least been doing it a long time. A beginner, often when they hit a hard problem, they'll think, well, I don't get it. I can't do this. This isn't the thing for me. I'm too dumb. A person who's been at it a long time has hit those brick walls dozens, hundreds, thousands of times. And so one might have some strategies for getting past it, but two knows that that feeling will pass, that this is not because I am dumb. When I don't understand something about coverage.py, it's not because I'm dumb. It's because it's a really complex thing, and I'm distracted, and I don't have enough information, and I'm tired, and I need a snack, and I would rather be outside in the fresh air or whatever. And I know that that feeling will pass. And that's a huge thing for people at the start of careers or projects or technologies to understand. This is kind of a joke definition of an expert. An expert is someone who has been a beginner many, many times. And that was a long answer.
A lot of people like me going into the coding industry and software development will take that advice to heart, really, because I feel like a lot of people like me, we sort of have this almost imposter syndrome where we see people who are able to maintain and make big applications, and we feel like
well,
we're
and
not there yet.
imposter syndrome is a great topic because Josh, I think you used the word esteemed to describe me at the introduction. I have imposter syndrome all the time. Working on coverage.py, one of the things that makes it complicated is it gets into things that are very, very nitty-gritty internals of Python, the language, and its implementation, and the details of how that implementation changes from version to version, which, whatever project you're about to take on, you're not going to have to deal with those complexities. But when I look at those problems, I think, if I were a core developer, if I understood how Python worked, if I could debug C code, I wouldn't have these problems. Like, if people only knew that I don't understand all that stuff, then they would know that coverage.py is being maintained by someone who doesn't know all the things they're supposed to know. So that feeling of imposter syndrome, that's another thing to get used to, because that's not going to go away either. I'm sorry to break this to you, but when you get your degree and when you've been in the industry for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, you're still going to be feeling imposter syndrome. And you just have to know that it's not real. You're fine. You're going to do fine. Everyone else feels that way too, and you're fine.
Yeah, no, it's mildly comforting to know that I'm not alone. I'm sure a lot of other people listening will know that it's nice to know that they're also not alone and that they're not the only ones who experience that, especially with experienced programmers like yourself who have been in the industry for decades.
Well, as a non-coder as well, it's quite. Oh, Dinesh has joined us. As a non-coder, it's
hello. I'm so
well. That's good.
I'm so sorry for the delay.
Well, it's nice to have you. It's nice
Surprise
to have you,
special guest star.
Okay.
It's
do you want to explain yourself, Dinesh?
It's really an honor to have you here. Okay. So since we started the project, Ned was one of our first guests we wanted to have over for the podcast, because I've been following the Python Discord for a while, and everyone seemed to know him somehow. And as a computer science student myself, it was fascinating to see someone who's not from our generation, but still has so much experience with computers. So I definitely told Josh that, yeah, we had to have him over right now. And so you're one of the first people we reached out.
Yeah,
and thankfully, you agreed.
We're making it happen. We're having some hiccups
while,
right now, but
since then.
I think it's happening.
Honestly, we extend a warm welcome to you.
Well, as well, just to build on Dinesh's point, obviously I don't code. I've never coded. The furthest I've gone is using Scratch software when I was like 7. That's like the most I've gone. Like hello world. That's as much as I can tell you. However, obviously, doing so much research, it's so obvious that you're a really talented individual, and even someone not like who doesn't code, it was really interesting to see, everything there is, to see about your GitHub and all of that, and it's brilliant. It's
Thank
brilliant
you.
to see.
I think probably, I don't know this because I'm a coder, but Josh, I don't know what domain you are headed towards, but I will guess that your domain is not that different from coding. That when you start, you will feel like you don't know enough to do it as well as the people with gray hair like me. And that the people with gray hair like me also feel like, I hope no one finds out that I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like that's a good motto in life. You don't always know what you're doing, but you go along with the ride, don't you?
You do, and you'll figure it out. You'll learn something. You'll be a little bit better next time, and the next time you hit a speed bump, it'll feel familiar, maybe a little bit frustrating because it's familiar, but you'll also know that you'll get past it.
Well, obviously we've encountered a few questions and a few hiccups, but we'll go back on track now that Dinesh is here. So yeah, I mean, Eric, I think it's you to ask the next question, just to kind of get back on track.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So it's always great to hear that you faced difficulties and you've came out positively from these challenges. But just to feel a little more lighthearted in the conversation, as someone who is deeply involved and rooted within the Python community, and someone who's experienced changes and trends in Python over these decades, what's something that you foresee in the language's future? Any trends or changes that you could extrapolate?
So Python's going to continue to grow. That's also one of the challenges of quote knowing Python, is that Python keeps changing. It keeps adding features. We just had version 3.12 come out and it added features. It's going to keep moving into new domains. The biggest change that's happening right now in the industry, and I don't know exactly how it's going to affect Python, is the rise of AI and ChatGPT and Copilot on GitHub. And I see a lot of people asking, does it make sense to become a software engineer these days? Because isn't AI going to do it all? And it's easy to forget that, or maybe you haven't heard, in the 1980s, there was the rise of these so-called fourth generation languages. And I don't even know what that refers to now. But at the time, there were people saying, well, does it make sense to learn C because there's going to be all these fourth generation languages? And so we're not going to need C programmers anymore. And then in the 90s, there was probably some other thing that felt like, well, this is going to make everything, we don't need programmers anymore because of this. And, every decade, there's something that's supposedly going to make programmers obsolete. And here we are. So I don't know, the ChatGPT and AI is astounding. I do not understand how it can do what it does. But I don't think it's going to make people obsolete. I mean, for one thing, I know looking in the Python Discord, people come in with ChatGPT stuff all the time and ask, how come it doesn't work? And the answer is, well, because it's not perfect. And if you can't figure out whether the AI is right or not, you shouldn't be using an AI. And someone's going to have to debug all that stuff. So yeah, maybe it will automate some of the boring tasks, but it's not going to automate the really hard tasks. We were just talking about getting stuck on problems where I couldn't even figure out what's going wrong and how to debug it. AI is not going to help with that. Those are the new problems, and AI can't go and scrape text off the internet from 3 years ago and find me the answer. So we're going to need programmers. But how the AI gets used is, well, to be determined. We have to see how that plays out.
I think within the computer science sphere itself, what Ned specified is actually a huge topic of discussion, because people are actually afraid that AI is going to replace all of their jobs. And like he said, I think a lot of people are questioning going into computer science today because they think their jobs are going to be replaced anyways in the next 10 years. And as a sophomore student myself, I'm constantly thinking the same thing. If AI is going to replace me, why am I even studying software?
I can tell you
why am I even coding anymore?
Yeah, and I can tell you one of the reasons why people feel that way
for us
is that when you start out in software, the impression is that mostly what you're going to do is you're going to write a bunch of cool code. And that is not what professional software engineering is like. A lot of software engineering is, one, what should I build? Two, what should it do? How should it work? Like what problem am I trying to solve, and what can I do to solve that problem? And what does my user want? He's written me a bug report. What does that mean? I need more information about that bug report. Do I agree with them that this is the correct behavior or not? Like, there's just a ton of stuff you do day to day, whether you're maintaining a side project or you're working for a big corporation. There's a ton of stuff you do that is not writing code. And that's what I meant about the AI automating the boring tasks. Like, in some ways, like sometimes writing the code, okay, I finally figured out what the bug was. I finally figured out that it was a bug, and here's how it should work. Okay, now I have to write the code. And sometimes that's the easy part.
Well, that's the thing. I think with AI, I think a lot of the fears that people have is that it's going to replace jobs, it's going to make, people redundant. But I think in a way, chat GBT or AI, it complements humans quite nicely. For example, if you don't know what you're doing, it's like chat GPT. First thing you do, you send a message to it. How do I do this? What do you do in this situation? And it always, it develops who you are as a person. So, for example, if you're coding, all of it can come together. It doesn't have to be, one or the other, and that's why I think it's a great addition to this modern
I
society.
think it works well as an assistant. Like, if you need some ideas, it's good. You have to be able to tell whether it's right or not. If you can't tell whether it's right, then yeah, you have made your job obsolete. You have given over your job to the AI. And you're going to be writing some code or text or whatever you've asked it to do that is not good. And don't do that. If you don't want your job to be replaced, don't give your job to the AI. Learn some stuff and figure out if it's right or not, and use it as an assistant.
As a college student right now, it's a pretty hot topic in schools, ChatGPT, using it in assignments and things like that. And our teachers actually, at my college specifically, they're not against using it, but they do tell us how to use it. So ChatGPT right now is more of a tool that can be used to sort of structure what you're doing instead of just doing it for you, which can be useful, like assignments kind of showing you how they should be structured, but you can't rely on it to just do it for you. That's not how
again,
it works
to make an
anymore,
analogy from
at least
decades before
for
you were
now.
born, I remember when it was controversial whether you would be allowed to use a calculator at a math test or not. And the idea was, well, if you're using a calculator, then you're not learning the arithmetic. You're not doing the arithmetic yourself. And the student's answer was, if I have a calculator, why do I have to learn how to do the arithmetic? And now that sounds crazy now. Of course you're going to use a calculator. We all have calculators. Why would we do without a calculator? We're going to get there with AI too. We just have to figure out, it's a new tool. We have to figure out how to use it. It's not going to replace people. I mean, 100 years, not 100 years ago, in the 1940s, when electronic computers first came about, people probably were worried that they were going to replace people. And they did replace some people. The word computer used to refer to a person who did arithmetic on paper a lot because they were computing. Those people got replaced. And now there's a huge industry of way more people telling the machines what to do. You'll be fine. It's a fascinating field. You should learn how to program computers. It's great fun.
I mean, the thing is, it's always, obviously, I'm sure a lot of the people listening in right now, like myself, never had a background with code. I mean, I know no one at all. In real life, there is no one around me, who's gets into code, and that's the thing. I think it's a very it's such an interesting field that enough people don't really think about. They kind of associate with, oh, well, it's too difficult to do these scripts or build these tools. And it does really just it's so interesting once you actually start to look into it. It's really just such an amazing field to see.
It is amazing. And two people who helped shape the field,
Actually,
Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple, and Alan Kay, who coined the term object-oriented programming, they both viewed programming as a liberal art in the sense that it gives you a perspective on the world and it gives you a way of thinking about problems, and that learning to write some programs is good not just for people who are going to do that as a profession, but for people who want to be well-rounded and understand the world around them. Learning a little bit about how computers work and what it feels like to tell a computer what to do will help you understand the computer-saturated world we live in, and just make you a better, well-rounded person as a liberal arts kind of pursuit.
Exactly. I think people who pursue other forms of career like biology or any other field for that matter should also get into programming because, like Ned says, I do consider it as a liberal arts because programming is something everyone can do. It's they just need a push. It's like holding a paintbrush or riding your first bicycle. The start is gonna be tough, obviously, but once you get there, it's really an enjoyable ride for the programmer and for you to as a learning experience as a whole. So Saturn and I are like we have to do that as a job daily, so we don't get to experience the fun part of it much. But I think people like Josh and the other people who are listening in who don't do computer science
Mm-hmm.
as
And,
their
and
major
one of the reasons
will
I
be able
think
to
that
relate
Python has
to
grown
what
as
just
much as
Ned
it
just
has
said.
over the decades is because it's very approachable. That um, people use Python not because they are software developers, but because they are biologists, let's say, and they want to write some programs to help them do biology. And Python as a language is much more approachable for people like that than C++ or Go or Java, for instance. And that's one of the reasons that it has flourished as it has. And just like when you take English classes in high school or college, you're not doing it because you're going to become a novelist. You do it because writing English is going to be important in your career. Whether you're a doctor or an electrical engineer, you're going to have to write at some point in order to express yourself to other people. Writing software might become an important part of your job, whether you're a biologist or electrical engineer or mechanical engineer or politician, or I mean, who knows what, right? There's lots of software out there in the world, and it's not all written by full-time software engineers. It's written by other domain experts who want to use software as part of the tools that they use to get their jobs done.
I think that moves us on
That's
to our next point.
actually I agree with that point because when we start out, yes, sure. Talking about your career, so outside of programming, what are some of the hobbies that bring you joy and contribute to your well-being? And most
Yeah,
importantly, how do
that's a
you
tricky one because
manage your work-life
my
balance?
my main hobby is also software engineering. In addition to maintaining coverage.py, I have other smaller developer tools that I maintain, and then just pure side art projects. I like mathy generative art kinds of things, and I've done a number of those over the years. And it's really great to be able to sort of switch gears from the style of programming that I do. Um, so I am kind of one note in that way for the most part, but I also like other nerdy pursuits like Rubik's cubes, um, uh, geometry. I've got all sorts of things like that here on my desk. I like to juggle. I like to bang away at the piano. I'm not very good at it, but I have a keyboard and I like to try to play music. I like being outside, taking walks, bike rides. I had a swim in the pool this morning. That was nice. Um, and I like hanging out with my kids when I get to see them. I have three sons. They're all grown now. My youngest is 25, but I was just talking to him on FaceTime earlier this morning. So that's always fun.
Well, I mean, obviously, coding is obviously such a big part of your hobbies and or your job as a whole. But like, do you ever feel like you need like to take breaks from coding as a whole, just for some downtime, just like to just kind of get away from it all and refresh
I
and
do, and
start anew?
the good thing about exercising outside is it does get me away from screens, out into the real world. I'm very interested in I live in Boston in the US, and I'm very interested in the geography of Boston and how it's changed over the years. And taking walks lets me explore that aspect of things. Um, I've seen people say things like, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to do no screens at all. And that's not me. I am on screens most of the time, honestly. And sometimes the break I take is I'm not writing code right now, but I'm in the Python Discord. And that's just a way to chat with people and help people. I really like being able to help people. I'm a huge fan of the idea that you can do it, and do not be discouraged. And if I can help you with that, that feels good to me. So that's sort of a software thing, but it's not really. It's talking to people about software. And the software parts of those conversations are not difficult or challenging for me. It's just providing people the little help they need to get going. So I find that very energizing.
Well, obviously, coding is just such a massive part, and you're widely known, especially in the Python community, for developing coverage.py, which we've obviously spoken briefly about. But for even me, like to the non-coders that are listening, obviously, I don't think even I couldn't tell you really much about coding, but like, can you try and explain what coverage.py is to the non-coders out there? And also, can you just speak a little bit about the journey in developing it and the actual experience that you got from
Sure.
the whole thing?
So this may seem weird to people who don't write software, but the way software gets built is you write a bunch of code to tell the computer what to do. And then you have to write a bunch of code to figure out whether that first pile of code worked. The second pile of code is called tests. Makes sense. And often, and this is the really surprising part, often there's more code in the tests than there is in the product. Let's call it the product. You might not be selling it for money, but the first thing you wanted to get done is that, we'll call it that, the product. Maybe it's a game, maybe it's a biology experiment or whatever it is. Often you'll have more code in the tests than you had in the product, which blows people's minds when they first get started, because the first thing you think when you start out to write tests is, ugh, I don't want to write tests. That sounds like a chore. And the idea that you've got more of them than the product itself is surprising. But then you've got a problem. How do you know whether the tests are good? That you wrote the product, you wrote the tests to figure out whether the product was good. How do you know whether your tests are good? Coverage measurement is a way of assessing the quality of your tests by looking to see how much of your product actually got run when you run your tests. Which sounds very esoteric. We're like 3 levels deep now, far away from the original problem we were trying to solve. But that's the way coding is. There are layers and layers of complexity and automation on top of automation to help the computer solve the problem you have, right? The first problem you had was the biology experiment. The second problem you had was, does my biology code work? The third problem you had was, are my tests any good? And at each step you can use software, another tool of software, to help you figure out that problem. And coverage.py is at that third level. Are my tests any good? And mostly what it does is it just watches to see what lines of code got run. And then it tells you, oh, those lines got run and those lines didn't.
Ned, so I'll just ask him to repeat the last bit.
On the journey of developing...
Do you mind if you just repeat last 20 seconds of what you just said?
I don't know where to pick up from.
We can conclude that.
So the tricky thing about software is that at each step you've got a problem to solve, and you're going to write some software to solve the problem. Let's say you have a biology experiment. You write some code to do the biology experiment. Now you've got a problem. Is your code any good? You write tests. That's how you write code to figure out whether your code was any good. But now you have another problem. Are your tests any good? So you use a tool like coverage.py to assess the quality of your tests by watching to see what lines in your product got run, and the lines that didn't get run are not tested. So that points you in a direction to where you can write more tests. The journey of writing coverage.py was an interesting one, and most people don't realize this. I didn't start that project. So people often say coverage.py was created by Ned Batchelder. It's not true. It was an existing project that I used when I needed some coverage measurement. And there was something it didn't do as well as I wanted it to. So I made a change to coverage.py, and I sent it to the maintainer, who did not respond. I couldn't get in touch with the maintainer. And so I figured, well, I'll maintain this thing. And now I've been doing it for 19 years. So be careful what you start up, because it might last a really long time. But it's been a fun journey. I've learned a lot, and a lot of people use it. It's very gratifying to know that a lot of people use it. and a lot of people know me from it, and that's very gratifying too.
I'll let Saturn and Eric and Dinesh, they'll be a bit more developed in the knowledge of this. So I'll let them discuss that more in detail and kind of just listen in and be captivated by it.
To be honest, I understand the entire point of it. So when you're actually looking at code, and looking at how much code actually is run tells you how much efficient code you've written. So if there's a lot of blocks of code that never get executed, it means that you've obviously written redundant code that you're not going to be using anywhere. So I think this is a really good initiative that not a lot of people would think of at the starting, but somehow Net did, and maintaining it for 19 years
Well,
consistently is a huge feat. I could never do something like that.
yes. Well, and that's the
So you've
point I
been
was going to make to you.
maintaining
You
the
just
package
said
for
you could
as
never
long as
do that.
I was alive.
Yeah.
Longer than I've been
You
alive.
just said you could never do that. You don't know what you can do. When I was 19, I probably thought I couldn't do it. And 19 years ago, if you told me you're going to be doing this for the next 19 years, you're crazy. Why would I do that? How could I do that? What even is there to do for 19 years? This package is kind of small. You don't know what the future holds. You don't know what you're capable of. And by the way, I did not invent the idea of coverage measurement. That's a long established tradition in software.
So I want to go a bit off track here. So one question I want to ask you is, since we were talking about being 19 years old, what did you think you'd
So
become when you were 19?
I'm in an
What
unusual
career paths
position
were you
because
looking
my
at?
mother was a computer programmer. We didn't call them software engineers back then, but my mother was a computer programmer. So I shouldn't say, I mean, she's still alive. She's retired now. So she had a career as a computer programmer. So there were computer books lying around the house. And in fact, her father was a statistician, and he had some books about computers. I don't know if he ever wrote software, but he had books about computers that I have now, which is kind of astounding. So it's kind of the family business for me to be a computer programmer, a software engineer, as we call it now. So I had no doubts at 19 that that's what I was going to do. I had been writing programs in high school, and I had gone to a specialized technical high school. So it wasn't like I was the nerd weirdo in high school. There were a lot of people at my high school who were doing that. We had a computer lab with computers that look ancient now, but at the time were pretty cool. And I knew that's what I was going to do. I loved it, and I was good at it. And I had a clear model of it from my mother. So that's what I was going to do. So I didn't have to go through, wondering about my life and where it was going to lead. That's what I was going to do, and that's what I have done. Now that might be a little disappointing to listeners who are wondering what they should do and feeling a bit either confused about possibilities or not seeing paths forward. There is a path for you, and it might be one of the paths that seems too difficult right now. But if you love it, you should pursue it.
I definitely think that's a reoccurring thing in our community, especially. I think a lot of people have a lot of confusion about where they want to go, what they want to do, and I think there is this nowadays this kind of culture where you're expected
Yeah.
to know what you're going to do, but I don't know. I'm 17. I don't know pretty much anyone who really has a cemented idea that they want to do this for the next. I mean, obviously we're 17. I mean, the age you retire goes up and up and up, and it's going to be 75, 80, and that's the thing. You're going to be doing it for 50 years, and there is absolutely no guarantee that you're going to be doing the same thing forever. I mean, and
Right.
that's kind of the joy. I think there's too much pressure that's being put onto people nowadays to know all
Right.
the time
And
what they're going to do.
it's so there is an idea now that you know what you're going to do, but I think also there's more acceptance now of, for instance, a gap year between high school and college than there was when I was growing up. When I was graduating from high school in 1980, I didn't know anyone who took a gap year. I'd never heard the phrase gap year. My son, whose old bedroom I'm sitting in right now, took a gap year after high school, and all right, great, you took a gap year, and he went on to college after that and found his career, and he's happily employed. And you don't have to be on railroad tracks towards a specific career. Speaking of my mother, she was a computer programmer, but she also, in the mid 70s, opened a feminist bookstore in New York City. She took a complete left turn on her career path and opened a feminist bookstore. And I guess that was her full-time job. I should know, but I guess she wasn't working as a programmer during those times, but maybe she was and did this on the side. She had two other partners in the bookstore. But she is a great example of someone who's just like, oh, I'm going to do something totally different now, and it'll be fine, or it won't, and we'll figure it out, and that's okay. There's a lot of possibilities for shifting careers. You can do something, you can study something in college and do it for 10 years and then decide, I'm going to do something different. There's a lot of educational options now that weren't around in 1980 when I was going into college. Online education. I work for edX.org, which is online courses. So continue, lifelong learners doing online courses, boot camps, YouTube videos, hang out in Python Discord and, learn stuff. There's all sorts of possibilities now that didn't exist when I was leaving high school that open up possibilities for how you want to learn things.
And
I agree. I have to agree with the point. Yeah. Felix, sorry to interrupt you. Please go on.
No, it's fine. So, when you said that you've always wanted to be a programmer, programming is such a expansive field. Did you have any idea like what you wanted to do in programming? Did you want to work like maybe, for example, like game development? Did you want to go to any specific company that you wanted to work
No,
at?
I guess I didn't really have a clear model. When I left college, I interviewed at a number of places. When I graduated from college, I actually took a job at my college because my girlfriend and now wife was continuing her education to get a master's degree at college. So we stayed, pretty close to campus, and I got a job working for the computer lab on campus, which was fun. And then I joined, whatever giant corporation would have me. At the time, it was Digital Equipment Corporation. I worked in the laser printer group, which was fun. It was nice to be able to see paper come out of a printer based on code that I had written. But I didn't have a clear picture. It was kind of just like jump into the job market and see what jobs are out there. A top contender was some company that did something really boring like healthcare records management or something.
I think that's like a big
I don't
problem.
know if I would have enjoyed that, but I didn't.
Right, because a big problem that I have specifically, and I believe a lot of other people my age do, is kind of, you get into programming, you have your degree, now what? Do you follow what you want to do? Do you go and try and find the highest paying job, even if you hate it?
It is a broad market, and again, the ideas of what something might be like, and then what those things actually are like, could be very different. Like a lot of beginning programmers, when you ask them what they'd like to make, they say, I'd like to make games. And sure, that's because it's fun to play games. It might not be as much fun making games as it is to play games. And I see people say things like, I'd love to be a QA tester for games because then I get to play games all day. Well, that's going to be a bit of a grind, literally, because you're going to be doing the exact same things in those games for 8 hours a day. And when you are bored of that game, your boss is going to say, please keep playing that game. And that is not going to be that much fun. So to me, I think what I've always found is that I like programming. I like coding. I like the process of building software. And to some extent, it doesn't matter that much what the software is meant to do. I think it helps to have a mission of the organization that you can get behind. Like I said, right now I work for edX.org, which is online education, much of it free, and I find that very exciting. But honestly, my day-to-day job has virtually nothing to do with education. It's about how can we keep this software working. I tell people that there's this big ship called edX.org, and on the top deck there are people learning stuff, and I'm in the boiler room shoveling coal into a boiler. And if I didn't like go to my own website and see that there are courses there, I'd barely know there were courses, 10 decks above me on the ship. And that's fine because I like the process of building software and I know that it is leading to education, but my day-to-day job isn't about education. It's about, here is a million lines of code and there's something that's not working about it. How do I make it work? Which will be true no matter what job you take. Now, you mentioned how much, the amount of money. A lot of it comes down to the people you work with. Find a team of people that you will enjoy working with because you're going to have a lot of interactions with them. And I know that's very difficult to figure out in a job interview, et cetera, but take those types of considerations into account when you look around at how you're going to be spending 8 or more hours a day, the people that you're interacting with.
Well, that's the thing as well. I think there's a culture nowadays. It's a very big money world. There's an artist called Ren who speaks about it very well. It's the money game, and it's always been. It's nowadays. I feel like a lot of people don't care as much about if you're passionate about something, but more about, am I going to have a $1 million yacht at the end of it? But in the meantime, is your life going to be miserable? You've got to enjoy what you're doing. And like you say, you've got to surround yourself like with these people that you actually, you like being with. And I mean, for example, for me, I'm who knows? I could get into coding on the side, but my passion is like sports psychology. It's one of them things, and you follow suit, and there's not a lot of money, but like you say, it's them layers in helping people. I think nowadays it needs to be a bit more of a world where you do support those with similar passions around you, but support them for the betterment and the development of especially like children and
Right.
teenagers
Absolutely.
all around the world.
Money is important. You have to support yourself, and that is more difficult now, it seems, as I hear from my children, than it felt like when I was starting out. So absolutely, you've got to support yourself. But to quote a song from when I was in high school that maybe you haven't heard, James Taylor said, "The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time." You're going to be dealing with people and goals that need to matter to you. And another strategy is, okay, go and get a job that's going to pay you enough that you have time left over to do the things that you'll actually enjoy. That's a risky strategy, but I encourage you to go out and find causes that matter to you. I coach Special Olympics swimming, mostly because my son is one of the athletes on the team. But honestly, if he said to me, I don't want to do that anymore, I would still go and coach the team because I really love spending an hour a week hanging out with those athletes and helping them do stuff. And it refills my energy to be able to help those people. So find things that give you energy and that make you feel happy. And if it can be your job, you have hit the jackpot. So think about the things about a job that can feed into those things. Yeah, I don't know if that's literally true, but
work a job you
no,
like, you never work a day in your life.
when you leave the house in the morning, you say, "Bye, honey, I'm going to work." No one says, "Bye, honey, I'm going to play." It's still a job. There's going to be times, even at a job you love, where you're like, "I cannot believe that they want me to do this right now. This is dumb."
Yeah.
But you'll get through those times.
Now, just to kind of get back on track, but also follow up on this, for those people at home, people going into the industry who would like to follow in your footsteps, what do you have? Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to get into programming, whether that be Python or
first of all, figure
community?
out what path works for you. In the Python Discord, I see people show up and say, "What's the best way to learn Python?" And there's like 3 things wrong with that sentence. First of all, it's going to depend on you, how you like to learn, how you like to study, what you already know, what your goal is, right? Are you hoping to become a core developer in the Python implementation itself, or are you a biologist that needs to automate an experiment? Those are completely different needs. So figure out what's right for you. You don't follow someone else. There's no end to the number of people, with gray hair like me who say, you got to learn C first, or videos are dumb, or you have to read this 1,000-page book. That's the only way to learn. Those people are all wrong. Not that those are bad ways, but they were the ways that were right for them. you've got to figure out what's right for you. If you can watch 10-minute long YouTube videos and watch 1,000 of them in a row and get no Python at the end of it, that's your path. I couldn't do that myself. That's not the way I learn. I like to have a project in front of me and be confronted with a specific problem in that project and then go research how to solve that problem. That's my learning style. So that's my first advice is find your own path and don't listen to the people that tell you you're doing it wrong. You're only doing it wrong if you're not learning, which you'll know. And ignore the gatekeepers who say things like Python is just for script kiddies, or you can't write real software with Python, or the cool kids are all doing C++, so on and so forth. Those are gatekeepers. They're wrong. You're fine. Learn the way you're going to learn. And find projects that interest you to write. So you don't, when you're 17 or whatever, you don't have to know that you're going to go into finance and start writing finance programs. If you want to write, platformer games, write platformer games. It doesn't mean that you have to go into the gaming industry. My understanding is that the gaming industry is a real sweatshop and long hours because you got to meet the Christmas deadlines, and it can be very difficult. So write games because you're interested in seeing how to make a game, and that's a good way to learn Python. And then you'll get a different job doing something completely different than games. Like I said earlier, my day job is mostly just keeping millions of lines of software working well. But as a side project, I like writing mathy kinds of art. I can't get paid to write mathy art, but that's okay. Mathy art helps me learn stuff, and it keeps me interested. So write the stuff that you like to write.
Well, you spoke about like gatekeeping as well, and I think there's a lot in this world. I don't want to talk about cancel culture because it's quite a dangerous topic to kind of get into. But I think with gatekeeping and the negativity that involves with stuff nowadays, I think there is, like you said, there is, well, for most things, there's no right answer. I think, like if you want to do something, do it in your way. If you look at tutorials online, like even just to build, like, I don't know, like say you're on IKEA, you know what I mean? You're building that thing. Sometimes there's not even instructions. You just got to do it and you'll find a way to do it. There's always the different, there is no written guideline for a lot of stuff. And that's kind of the beauty of it because you can kind of put it all
Right.
together in your
And
own way.
what I will say is that actually writing software is the best way to learn how to write software. I think it's very easy to passively take in things like YouTube videos. I just saw a page somewhere about doing the thing, and it had a dozen or two statements like watching someone do the thing is not doing the thing. Planning to do the thing is not doing the thing. You have to do the thing. So whatever it is you want to do, you have to start doing it. If you watch 1,000 hours of YouTube videos of someone else writing software because you want to learn to write software, you're not writing software yet. Watch 10 minutes and then do 10 minutes of what that person did. At least you're writing software. Writing software is how you're going to learn to write software. So whatever it takes to get you to that point of actually typing code yourself, that's the path you should take.
I think that goes again for a lot of different career paths as well. I think you can kind of mold that. I mean, I'm going to use, this is a bit of bias myself because I'm really into football or soccer, as you'll call it. If you watch 100,000 videos of Lionel Messi doing dribbles and different things, until you actually go and do that outside, there is not a single chance that you're gonna ever be able to make be the same ability. You've just got to do it. I think that's a lot of people think that you can just watch something and you think, right, I've got this now.
That's right.
You've just got to do it yourself.
There's
a
famous book, well, it's online, but I guess it's also a book called Learn Python the Hard Way. And it's kind of a joke title, but if you get into it, you'll see the point he makes is you have to type out the code I'm showing you. Do not copy the code and paste it. I want you to literally retype the code that I'm showing you, because typing that code will get you to actually look at what you're doing, and you'll actually get to see the steps that went into putting this code together. So that's the cleverest way to turn a passive activity, reading some code, and turn it into an active activity. You didn't even have to think up the code, but at least you had to type the code.
Exactly. So experience is actually writing software is going to be your biggest teacher, actually learning to write software. That seems
Yeah.
really
Well,
intuitive, but that's actually good advice. So, stepping away from the topic of programming, Ned, you've been active about. Yeah, sure, sure. Go ahead. You're open to about your personal life in your blog, right? So that's how we actually found out information about you. And it's really nice to see the little insights and tidbits you give about your life in the blog. And I think it's been up for a
21 and
good
a
20
half
years now. I don't know exactly how long you've been keeping it up. But and something you speak about in the blog is that your son is autist. That's great. That's awesome. So something you speak about in the blog is that your son is autistic. So as a parent, we'd like to know about some of the challenges that you faced with this, but also at the same time made it an enjoyable experience in parenting. Because I'm sure a lot of our community is neurodivergent, and
Mhm.
I'm sure they'll
Yeah.
relate to
Um,
this.
so like I said, I have three sons, one autistic and two, let's say, typically developing, whatever term you want to use. They both went to art school, so I actually say of my three sons, one is autistic and two are artistic. Um, so the main thing that it taught me is that they're all different. I used to have a coworker who had two sons, and he said that when he went on a trip, he always had to bring back a present, but it had to be two of the exact same thing, because if they were different, then somehow the two sons would decide which was the better present, and therefore who was liked better, or something like that. They had to be treated the same all the time. In my family, it was clear from the start that we were not going to treat everyone the same, because the three boys were clearly different. And that it helped us to, well, one, we had to figure out for my oldest son, my autistic son, Nat, we had to figure out for him, well, what's going to work for him? What does he need right now? It's clearly not, whatever the school down the street is just going to do for everybody. We've got to figure out something different for him. But it also let us look at our other two boys and say, well, okay, so what do they need? Like, they probably don't just want, whatever is coming out of the can from the school down the street either. They probably want something different, and they've chosen unconventional paths as well. So that right off from the start was a thing that we had to learn to do as parents. Um, and it's continued to be difficult to figure out what my oldest son needs. He's 34 now. He lives in a group home about 20 minutes away. He's continuing to make his own choices. He used to come home every weekend, and recently he started saying he doesn't want to come home every weekend, which is a little hard for us to hear. Like, what's wrong with us? Why don't you want to hang out with us? But also, wow, that's great that you like it there. Like, we found you a place to live that you seem to really like. Um, I mentioned Special Olympics earlier. My son does Special Olympics basketball and swimming, and I'm one of the coaches on the swim team, and I love it. I would not have been involved with that if it weren't for him. Um, I I enjoy things with my son Nat that other 34-year-olds wouldn't want to do, because Nat is different. We like to walk together. There's not a lot of talking. Nat doesn't talk much, but we have a very companionable walk together. He's very fast. He keeps me fit. Um, so, we've learned to see the world through his eyes, enjoy smaller things, let's say, bake a lot of cakes, for instance, um, and just approach life for him at his level, at what he needs, and think about him as an individual rather than as a generic 34-year-old. You mentioned neurodivergence. Uh, yeah, well, like I said, he
I'm
doesn't
sure
want to come
he's
home and see
really
me
happy
much
to have
anymore.
a
So, but I'm
supporting
not sure
parent in it.
exactly how he feels about me, but we get along. You mentioned neurodivergence as among your listeners. Um, my son Nat is truly disabled. He's not going to go to college. He's not going to live independently.
Yes, yeah.
He can do a lot of things, but he is clearly disabled. And I, the people who identify as neurodivergent probably wouldn't identify as disabled. They're very capable. They're out in the world. They're going to have careers, and et cetera, et cetera. But they are going to encounter difficulties fitting in, let's say, maybe. I know I'm not always comfortable in social settings where I don't know how to make small talk. I couldn't talk to Josh about soccer. I don't know anything about soccer. I don't follow sports. Um, find communities of people that are like you. I think that's a huge advantage to being 17 or 19 now than when I was 17 or 19. There was no internet when I was in high school. The people that I got to choose from were whoever was at my high school. I was very lucky that I was at a technical high school where it was not unusual to be a nerd in the computer lab. I was the captain of the math team of all things. Um, these days, if you don't have people like you in around you in school, you've got online communities that you can find. Um, and find your tribe and be part of it, and do not worry if you don't fit in with a bunch of other people that you happen to get thrown in with. Those people don't matter. It may not seem like it now, but the world you're in right now, that's not going to last. You can find new worlds.
I feel that that leads us quite nicely onto my next point. It's obviously in your blog you speak about a whole range of different topics, but one thing as well is the fact that your mother is is lesbian. And unfortunately, in this modern day world, well, really, you know, always adversity has always been, a massive problem. And unfortunately, it seems to be, again, I spoke about cancel culture. For some reason in society, there always seems to be a little bit of adversity. And I'm just wondering, obviously, growing up with your mother being lesbian, have you ever faced any adversity? And if so, what can you say to the people, well, probably listening right now, who would face adversity every day
Yeah.
just for no apparent reason?
So again, I feel like I was kind of lucky. I've been thinking about this question. I was kind of lucky in that in the 1970s, when I was in high school in New York City, where I grew up, um, first of all, people I hung out with at school, for the most part, never met my mother. I was very independent. I took the subway in New York City to school, took the subway home. Um, my main friend who I hung out with, we would go to his house a lot. I don't know if he ever or much came over to my house. So a lot of the adversity that I might have encountered, I probably just missed because there wasn't a lot of overlap between those two parts of my world. And I went to, I mean, was living in Manhattan, which is a very liberal place. It was a private school. For listeners in the UK, that's a public school. Um, so it was uh, probably very liberal, but still, I remember being anxious. I didn't want people to know about it. I didn't know how it was going to land with people, but I didn't have to do much dealing with people finding out about it because for the most part, people didn't find out about it. Um, I do remember at summer camp, there was a parents' weekend, and there was a girl at summer camp, and there were two women of her, parents' age that she was showing around the camp. And I looked at them and I thought, okay, I see you. I get what's going on. And she and I, we kind of had a look, like we kind of nodded to each other. And I think that was a connection we made, that we had this same thing going on, and it wasn't exactly a secret, but we weren't very public about it. And I think that goes back to finding a tribe, finding a community that you feel a part of. Um, like I said before, the people you're thrown in with at school, you didn't get to choose those people. Maybe they're kind of like you just because they're in your major or the school has a certain demographic that they serve. Um, but you didn't choose them, and you don't have to stick with them. You're not obligated to fit in with them or be friends with them. If you can be friends with them, that's great. The kinds of people that you're good friends with in school years can last a long time. But if it's not working out, it's not your fault. You can just forget them and find a different community to be a part of. That's one of the things I love about the Python world. There's a famous saying about Python: you come for the language and you stay for the community. And I see that in the Python Discord. It's a great community. Um, and I've got a lot of friends that I've made online through being in the Python world. And whatever you're into, you can find a community online like that too. And it's not going to be drama free. There'll be problems, there'll be conflicts. That's because communities are made of people, and people are messy. But find one that suits you.
So one key takeaway
Find your
we
tribe.
can take away from this interview is find your tribe and stick to them. You'll always find
Absolutely.
someone who's gonna be agreeable.
Exactly. Well, all right. Thank you for being so open about such a sensitive topic, Ned. I'm sure it'll definitely, reverberate with some members in our community as well, hearing about your experiences firsthand. Now, before to get back into coding, can you share some more, insights on the tools you find essential for development and coding, like in your day-to-day life, like extensions and things you do?
Sure, although I
habits,
will caution
tools,
you, the
whatnot?
tools that work for me might not work for you, and that's okay. This is another style of gatekeeping. You know, oh, you got to use VS Code. VS Code is way better than PyCharm. I don't use either of those two things. I use Vim as a text editor, which feels old school, gray-haired kind of thing to do, and that's fine. I'm not saying it because you should use Vim. I'm saying it because it's what I use. And if you want to use VS Code, that's great. I've known really competent programmers that use text editors that I find completely underpowered. And I thought only noobs who hadn't figured out that there were better options, only they used that text editor. And here's a person that is writing great software and they use that text editor. And that's because the tools don't matter as much as the product does. What matters is the stuff you can do, not the tools you use. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't find tools. Go and find the tools that work for you. Absolutely. My text editor is tricked out in all sorts of ways. I've got all sorts of command line shortcuts. I've got all sorts of packages I rely on all the time. Surrounding yourself with tooling is really important. I can see on Josh's video, he's sitting in a really cool gamer's chair. That's because that helps with whatever you're doing, even if it's just to make you feel good about what you're doing. It's important to have the right tools, right? I'm wearing a headset because the microphone is going to make my audio sound better. Eric and Josh have really cool microphones because it's going to make the audio sound better. The words are the most important thing, but how you make the words and how the words sound also matters. So find the tools that speak to you, that fill a gap in your workflow, and think about that tooling and write great software. I could recommend some libraries that are really great, but they're the libraries that most people recommend. Requests is really good for making HTTP requests, and Rich is really cool for making nice terminal output. But the main thing, and I keep coming back to this, is find what works for you. You are the pilot of your ship, and the choices you make are important. But it's not important that they be the same choices that someone else made.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean,
like we said,
oh, go on, Dash.
I'm
Go on,
from
Dinesh.
programming, and yeah. So it's gonna be a unique experience for every single person, right?
Right.
No two people are gonna start out the same way and develop their careers in the same way. So it's key that each of us realizes what exactly we lack in and which tools exactly will help us complement that. See, me
Nope.
personally, I
Wait,
use
wait.
VS Code. Sorry, Ned.
You don't have to
because
apologize
that's
to
what
me
best
for
suited
using
to
VS
me.
Code. That's the point.
So it's
I am not trying to get you to use Vim. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm gonna act like I have any idea what you
Okay,
guys are
so-
talking about.
Josh, you're sitting in the wrong brand of gamer's chair. If you were cool, you'd have the right brand of
No, we're
gamer's
just talking
chair.
about different text editors, just nothing fancy.
Yeah, God, it's
You're not a real programmer, Felix. It's just how Dinesh
So I couldn't
loves
help but
Microsoft
notice
Visual
your
Studio.
T-shirt. I think
Yeah,
I
this is-
saw this.
Yeah, this
art
T-shirt
on
that
your
I'm wearing.
blog. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is Sleepy Snake.
Yeah,
This is
I'm
the
pretty sure I
mascot
saw
for my
this on your
side
blog.
project coverage.py. He's a snake curled up in bed, and he's covered, and he's this was drawn by my youngest son, who has my artistic youngest son, who has a degree in illustration.
That's brilliant. That's so sick.
Yeah.
That is adorable. That is
We
really
got to get the
adorable.
T-shirt
I'd like to
train
get
going.
my
We gotta
hands
get some
on one
T-shirts
t-shirt.
made. Absolutely.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
I'd buy it.
I would buy too, even though I know absolutely nothing about it. I would get one too. Well, I think that rounds us off pretty nicely. Unless anyone would like to ask anything else, I'll take that as a no. Okay, right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Ned. Like really enjoyed having such a a detailed conversation about not only coding but general life. It's been really it's just been
Thank you.
really,
It's
really
been fun
nice.
being here.
Well, I think that rounds us off very, very nicely. I'd like to thank everyone for having us on, for listening in, and again, thank you so much for joining us, Ned. And obviously, we'll see you at home in the next episode. So, if everyone would like to say goodbye, I think we can round it off.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. See you all later.
Thanks for
Bye,
being here,
Ned.
Ned.
It's been a
Bye, Ned.
privilege talking to you.